you do is you prepare as thoroughly as you can. The guys play their asses off.
Playoffs? What are talking about? Playoffs? You kidding me? Playoffs? I just hope we can win a game. Another game.
Listen, we're talking about practice. Not a game, not a game, not a game. We're talking about practice.
That you probably won't say it again.
I bet I do.
Okay.
Correct?
If you want to crown them, you crown their ass. But they are who we thought they were. And we let them off the hook.
4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Gather around, Skull brothers and sisters. This is Skull Rants, brought to you by Minnesota Sports Talk. I'm your host, Dave. You can find me on Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook at Skull World. I got a special guest, Mr. I'm all over Twitter, Jason Harmon from the Social Network on VikesNow. Did I get that right?
Yes. VikesNow Network on YouTube.
About time this son of a bitch got on YouTube. I'm telling you, he's all over the place, and probably one of my favorite guys to follow on Twitter.
You were my first YouTube show last year, by the way. You were the first time I did a podcast.
If you guys didn't know, I'm gonna have him tell you the story of what happened to him before the Giants playoff game.
Oh boy!
Or how you went to how you got about going to that game.
So, I mean, long story short, I used Twitter in college to send like hyper specific memes about our college, and like occasionally they would kind of, I don't know, blow up. I don't know, as much as it could at a small private college. And then I started getting more into Vikings Twitter, like very shallow waters. And during the coaching search a couple years ago, I really dove in, started following like hundreds and hundreds of Vikings accounts, started to gain some traction. And after the 22 season, I just tweeted as a joke, tagging the Vikings like, hey, you guys should give me free playoff tickets. Thanks. Well, it turns out they had been watching my videos of me at my local Vikings bar, jumping up and down on tables with a literal drum leading the skull chant. And nothing happened. And then 3 days later, I'm at work and Delta Airlines replied saying they had airplane tickets for me. And then the Vikings said, yep, you're coming to the game. And that was weird. That kind of threw me off. I thought I was it was right when like the pay for verification on Twitter came out. So I thought I was getting scammed. Like I legitimately like spent like 20 minutes just checking like what is going on. And then
was it a Nigerian prince?
Yeah, I didn't know. I thought I was going to end up in an alley somewhere getting mugged, but I think 10K Sports wrote a quick piece about it real quick, just with the screenshots. And then I heard from you. I heard from a lot of the local news. There's a USA Today article about it. One of the networks like met us at the airport. It was weird. It was very like, it just threw me off. But we got to go onto the sideline before the game, watch warmups. We were actually on the Giants sideline. So like in hindsight, off the record for legal purposes, I could have totally like kicked Daniel Jones in the knee and saved us some trouble. Can't believe I'm saying Daniel Jones caused us trouble, but hey, it was an incredible experience. Obviously, the results of the game, not so much. We ordered Red Cow from Uber Eats. Those of you in Minneapolis know what's up. And we just depressingly
ate. Fort Lauderdale, so.
Really? I would not want in Arizona, but we just simply ate it.
Closed down after COVID, though.
We just depressed ate Red Cow from Uber Eats in our hotel room on the floor after the game. But the cool thing about that was like that allowed me to kind of get connected to a lot more people in the Vikings community. And it's been really awesome since. So I mean, definitely skyrocketed some stuff.
Like I didn't start getting active on Twitter. I had gradually just grown, I just gradually was just growing it, just thinking maybe one day I'll use it. And that's why it's when I first started getting a little bit active, and then I saw you, and that's honestly you were. I saw your video. I saw that you were going to the game, and that's why I reached out to you, just because I thought it was a great interest story, and I think I was probably the last person to interview you before you left. If I'm not mistaken.
I think so. So the weird thing that
So
happened.
you looked like you were in a rush, man. You were like,
Well, so I at the time I was very exciting training classes of new mortgage bankers to pass their federal exam. Very exciting job. And we were in the biggest week of that, which is the federally required portion of that. And I was leading those trainings, which is it's a tough week as a trainer. It's tiring because you're talking for like 6-7 hours straight all day about federal law and all that fun stuff. And the tweet thing happened on like a Thursday, and by Friday morning I had about like 8 interview requests from the news, and I was like, I don't know, I have to work today. And I messaged my leader at the time, and she was like, dude, take the day. She's like, soak it in. I was like, and we had to pack. It was just all chaos. But it was definitely the coolest experience like I've ever gotten. Again, wish it was a dub, but it was still unbelievably fun.
yeah, I mean, I could still consider myself pretty fledgling channel back then because it has been almost two, geez, it's a year and a
A little
half.
over a year. Yeah. Going on
Yeah,
like
so
14
it's
months.
like you've taken off, I've grown, and now you're back, and I'm glad you did. And I wasn't expecting you to reply to me. And like you said, you hadn't been on a YouTube channel before, and I just thought it was great. I reach out to everybody to come on my show, but gosh, you stood out to me, so that's why I asked you to come on. I'm glad you're back, and
Well, I
I'm super
appreciate it.
glad that you decided to take the step to get on YouTube, especially with a guy that knows his stuff like Dusty Baker.
Yeah. And it's a cool.
What's that like? You getting on his channel because we do similar stuff. He's had more experience. He's been on Twitter longer, obviously. So he's trying to build a network there, and that's my aspirations too. But he's already doing it. So what's that like?
It's really awesome. Our Slack channel with all of us and those who will be hosting upcoming shows. Hint, hint for those interested. Keep an eye out. It is absolute chaos. It is basically Vikings Twitter in a work communication space. But it's really awesome. I think there are a ton of Vikings podcasts. I know with a lot of NFL teams,
There's over 60.
a lot. Yeah, obviously you have
track.
obviously there's some of the big dogs, things like that. And for me, it was something where like I always wanted to get into like Vikings focused content creation. What happened with those tickets last year like helped gain me a bit of a following that kind of helped me see that like, hey, maybe this could happen. Still have a lot of work to go as far as like where I ultimately want to be, but partnering with Dusty is like really awesome. I think that what I like is that it's one channel with a bunch of different things. We're going to have a lot of different stuff coming out with like film breakdown, different takes, different opinions, some really awesome special guests coming up. I'm not going to formally break news. That's not mine to break, but there's some really exciting guests coming up. And yeah, it's really awesome to be able to kind of ride those coattails a little bit because it takes a lot of the guesswork out of it to join something that's already up and running and gaining momentum like that.
Yeah, I remember my first big well, I haven't had many, but getting Chuck Foreman to come on, and one of my favorites was my all-time favorite, if it wasn't Wabi recently, because he's been on my show 4 times, but was Greg Coleman. He was amazing, and Paul Krause was absolute delight when he came on, and those were just like happenstance. So and my advice to anybody that's want to start YouTube: take advantage of something. Chuck Foreman followed me on his birthday for some reason on Twitter, and I reached out to him, and he responded. So don't shoot your shots, and think good things happen. And Jason, you've taken advantage of every single one of them, and you're a smart man. Well, let's talk about the Vikings. Now, I think someone tweeted out like, and I commented that Jason Harmon, he supported whoever our quarterback was last year. You even went to the Vegas game wearing
Astronaut helmet.
helmet.
Children's astronaut helmet that I bought on Amazon 2 days
and
before.
you were with my buddies SK in a picture, which was
Love
awesome.
Sean.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. Just tell us about your experience, that roller coaster ride we had of quarterbacks last year.
I mean, it's so funny because I've been blocked by certain notorious, if there is a definition of a Kirk stand, we know there's a few people who lean into that maybe. Not in an ironic or like friendly way. I've been called names by them, and I've also been put on like Kirk lovers lists on Twitter. So it's really funny.
That'd be
perfect middle.
Boom Skull put me on one.
So it's like funny to write that perfect middle. Kirk to me was always like that guy you love, but because he's on your team and because of those expectations, like you could pick on him a little bit, but as soon as somebody else did, it was like, he's a top 10 quarterback. Don't talk about my guy like that. Last year, I remember really that, and I know that everyone's said this on Twitter, that touchdown pass to Jordan Addison after the turnover at Lambeau, I was like, oh, we're cooking with fire. We're back. We're going, back, man. Baby.
We're going.
And then I just remember being like, oh, no.
We know what's next.
We had the bye, and suddenly that game against Atlanta became like really interesting because of Jaron Hall. I was at the NASCAR Cup Championship race, and so I'm like, okay, what time the race kicks off at 1? The Vikings play at 11. I can watch. I'm gonna say this real quick. If you're a NASCAR fan, Phoenix is the worst. I don't know why they host the race there. It's the most boring track. Regardless, I just was watching on my phone, and I was like, oh, Jaron Hall looks good. Oh, he gave himself a concussion. What's gonna happen? And those were like, I remember especially being able to watch the Saints game the next week. Like I was like, what is going on? Like this is insane. And then Denver had some good moments, then came back to reality, and then the Bears game.
He played all right the first half of Denver. I keep
saying that touchdown in Denver though, where he was running towards, where he was kind of running out of bounds, shoved the guy off him, and just dinked it in. That was kind of cool. That was a cool moment. But you know, it was an interesting year. And then Nick Mullins, at that point, I'm gonna be accused of being a bad fan. I had just once I saw what was going on in that Bengals game, I just prepared myself like it's probably done. And the fact we got to enjoy a month of competitive football after Kirk got hurt was just, some people was like, oh, it hurts the draft stock. Yeah, well, right now we all are focused on that, but it was still fun in the moment. But in that moment, I was just kind of mentally preparing myself like this probably isn't going anywhere. But he also I did enjoy the last game against Detroit because I made a Nick Mullins chaos bet of him throwing over 350, Jefferson getting a touchdown and over 100 yards, and Addison needed like 60, and I think he fell like 9 yards short because those last two passes to him were picked. So that left a sour taste. So next time you play Nick, win me my parlay, please.
It's funny you mentioned that, Jason, because when I was actually getting new phones for me and my wife, and we're at I saw your bet, and I'm like monitoring this. I'm like, I'm telling the woman, like, I got there's this guy that I know, and he's like 9 yards short of winning some big money. And,
it was like $20 to win like 500-600. It was so, right before Valentine's Day too.
And I honestly forgot that was you until you mentioned it on one of your shows, I think, and.
Yeah.
Or you tweeted out a reminder of it, or something like that. I'm like, oh yeah, that was him. But I was sitting at a Verizon wireless store, watching the game on my phone, thinking, oh yeah, this guy is so close. He's so close.
Well, that touchdown to Addison, 1, he dropped one. That's on him. 2, the other one though, I thought that was like a 50, 55-yard touchdown. I was like 10, 15 yards off. And then he had like 2 more catches for like 3 yards and then 2 interceptions targeting him towards the end. I never bet on the Vikings. I don't bet very often in general because once I win, I get too cocky. But like that game, I was just like, I'm going to have as much fun with this as I can. That was 9 yards short. I was in a bad mood.
Oh God, I'd be kicking shit. I don't know about you, but yeah, I would be so pissed. But yeah, it's $20. But yeah, a nice ride, right? Last year didn't go as we wanted. I tell people I am completely. I will root for the Vikings even if we're 0-15 going to the last game or 0-16 going to the last game of the season. But I will accept the results, and we have accepted the results of being the 11th overall pick. We've never picked a quarterback in the top 10 of any draft. What do you think our chances are right now? Because I think you, like me and many others, want us to do that.
Yeah.
What do you think our chances are, and where do you think the opportunity lies on who will trade up with?
This is such a non-answer, but at this point, it's really hard to say because of the smoke screens. Like, I'll give you an example I gave on our podcast yesterday. The rumor is Washington and New England won't trade. So everyone's like, well, you can't call them. They won't trade. Austin Fort comes out in Arizona and says, we're open for business. And everyone's like, that's a smokescreen. They're not going to trade. I'm like, well, what tells you, oh, we're not going to trade means we're not going to trade, but hey, we're going to trade suddenly means we're not going to trade. I will be honest, I don't, outside of wanting to maybe be wowed by an incredible bet for the number 4 pick, there's no reason for Arizona to come out and say we're open to business unless to some extent they were. There's the first 3 picks are going to be what they are. It's going to be those top 3 quarterbacks, most likely. They have no leverage. They have nothing to do other than maybe solicit trade offers. So it makes no sense. I think I had tweeted just before this, at this point, especially if you're talking about Drake May, and really with somebody like McCarthy, it comes down to like, if KOC 100% believes that's the guy, I'd be okay with 2 firsts this year, 25 and 26 first. And that's a hefty price. 4. Because I think for some of those teams like New England and Arizona, it might take that to convince them. But I look, New England very well may not be interested in trading. I think that's a huge mistake to grab a rookie and put them into that situation, because they have nothing. Like, they just don't have a team. But I think if you do that, the thing that allows that is the Vikings cap flexibility for next year. We have some good defensive talent we signed this year, some for 1-year deals, some with I think 2-3 years. And obviously, we have a couple holes in the interior offensive line and defensive line, but those could easily be fixed through free agency next year with plenty of room to spare. I think at this point, as Kirk would probably say, frick them draft picks. I'm ready just to go all in as long as KOC fully identifies that guy. Because if he does that, I believe in him.
Yeah, you can't be lukewarm about a guy and give up 4 first-round draft picks. But I am going to make that my thumbnail that I got you doing the hug, the meme.
Oh, God.
I've never been memed, but you've been memed.
It came out of nowhere. It was
you've
weird.
Been memed. Yeah, I even did it. I even memed you.
It was funny.
So I have put you on my thumbnail, and I'm going to put, I'll give up 4 first-round picks. And I'll
do it.
A couple quarterbacks there. So that's the thumbnail right now.
If it wasn't for the fact that with Daniil leaving, we signed 2 guys in Van Ginkel and Grenard that I think as a combo are better than Daniil and Wanham, I would maybe change my tune a bit. But I think we had a very good free agency, and now it's time to go all in, identify your guy, sell the farm, and fix needs next year.
Dude, you read my freaking mind, because all day I was thinking about questions to ask you, and I wanted to bring up the point. Even though I think probably Daniil and Davenport, if healthy, would probably be the better combo, but I thought Van Ginkel and Greenard were better than him and Wanham, but also probably more suited to the defense.
Yeah.
Do you feel the same way?
100%. It's not like
you can put Daniil Hunter in anything.
Well, 100%.
He's freaking awesome at anything.
I think he has his preference. But I think, I think if you look at Twitter, like, I think there's 100% fair criticism of Kwesi, especially in his first year or two. But there's some people who act like he just looks at PFF grades and free agency rankings and drafts people or assigns people, I should say. I think like Brian Flores doesn't come back if he's not getting a lot of input into who gets signed and
100%.
where allocation of funds and resources are going. I trust Brian Flores. He did wonders last year with a unit that was not his unit, aside from a couple pieces.
Well, you got to think that first year too that he was developing a team around Donatello, not Donatel, Donatello.
Oh,
and now it's Flores, and now he's finally got a full off season. Again, he's asking for input. He knows his limitations, and it's not to be scouting. He came from a basketball background and a stock background, not a football background at all. So, I mean, obviously he's going to have to rely on people, and I think he does, and I think he did so this year. Now, keep in mind, I think once we got Kirk Cousins left and Daniil Hunter left, I think he went full bore into the Patriot way and let those veteran free agents walk so we can collect possible picks next year in the third round, especially since we don't have a second next year either, and probably not going to have a first. So we might have multiple third round picks, which definitely helps him. But you made up a great point as, and I had been wanting Kirk to be 2024 and then have the rookie take over in 2025 with all that free agent money and just in 2 drafts and 2 off seasons. And now you got the team, the rookie just to step in. And that's the way I felt about it. I mean, do you think that's the big play, I think, 2025 and then
100%.
on into 2026?
100%. And like, I wanted Kirk back at 1 year.
Yeah.
We
knew we couldn't get him back for 1 year, but yeah.
I mean, here's where I was at, in all honesty, and where I was a little critical of how things went down. I like Kirk a lot. I think he's the best Vikings quarterback outside of 2009 Brett Favre that I've consistently gotten to see. He's had the longest tenure of any Vikings quarterback I've seen. So I'm very used to what his strengths are. And I think any team could win with that. But he was brought in here with the urgency and expectation of a Super Bowl or bust. And I think a 1 year prove it deal would have been, given the fact that the team was at a fork in the road, would have made sense for both parties. But at the end of the day, if Atlanta's going to look at you and say, hey, we know you're 36, we know you're injured, we still want to guarantee you $100 million with the opportunity to get up to 180. I don't blame him for taking that. It's not like, he cared, he would have played 1 year in Minnesota. I just don't think it made sense for the Vikings to compete with that type of projection, given what too.
Yeah, I mean, we missed our opportunity to extend him an extra year when Kwesi first came in here and extend him for only 1 year. That's me looking back hindsight.
Yeah.
But now we've gotten to free agency and we couldn't compete with that. We weren't going to compete with that.
Well, the plan you're talking about. Go ahead.
Kwesi made the right decision now that we're, facing free agency. We're giving him a year and some change, and they're giving him 2 and some change guaranteed, and the extra 2 years of potentially sticking with the team. We weren't going to compete with that. So, and once we didn't, Kwesi pivoted perfectly, in my opinion. Shy of Sam Darnold, but that might be our next topic. But you were about to say something.
Well, I was just going to say to your point real quick, people forget that, like, we tried to do that last year. Like, they were very aggressive trying to evaluate Bryce Young, who, once it was clear he was going number 1, they turned to Anthony Richardson. Wish there was some focus on CJ Stroud, maybe a little. That would have been ideal. But hindsight,
he was
right?
My
You
number
never
1.
know.
Yeah, he was my number 1. And I did like Anthony Richardson. So those 2 guys were my guys.
But Kwesi, showed last year he was willing to get aggressive, and Arizona ultimately thought that number of picks equal across both parties, Houston would have a worse record and have more valuable picks than the Vikings. And it's really funny how that turned out in hindsight. But
that's true. I mean, that's a good point. Yeah.
So, it's interesting. It's going to be really interesting to see what plan A is I think if
we're in Plan D right now, or C. We're in Plan C right now, honestly. But
well, yeah, I think.
but
But
it's
I'm
a good
saying
plan. It's a good plan.
as far as the Plan A in Plan C, I guess. I would say, as far as do they identify that guy? Do they make that move? If so, yeah, is it going to be weird watching Darnold for a few games? Probably, but like I had to witness Jaron Hall's game against the Packers in person. I had to watch Dobbs not be able to do anything against the Raiders in person last year. I could handle Sam Darnold probably. I
Right.
could deal.
So yeah, the thought is for a lot of people is that KOC can fix him, right? If he has to start, and it looks like honestly, almost whoever we draft, it almost looks like Sam Darnold would start the season unless in camp KOC goes completely out of his norm and plays rookies.
Yeah.
Because even Jordan Addison wasn't ahead of KJ Osborne to start the season. And the only guy he seems to want to start right away as a rookie is Ed Ingram. And like, come on, there's some better players in other positions that give these guys a chance. And where do you think that is? I mean, do you feel like he's going to give that rookie quarterback he drafts a good shot at starting week 1, or do you think it is a bridge situation?
I think it depends. This again, non-answer. I just think it
Come
depends on who it
on,
is.
get off the fence,
Because
man.
because with McCarthy's very young, right? You bring in
Right.
somebody like Penix or the other older quarterback who's a late first to early second round pick, who I've been
24-year-old
calling
Bo Nix, yeah.
Voldemort lately, because I'm not having it. Those guys maybe have more experience and could be more ready to handle the mental load. But like you look at JJ McCarthy, he just played in the national championship game. Like that's a lot of pressure. You were, the top ranked team in the country all season. You had a media scandal or a scandal in the media about cheating. All cameras and eyes were on him. I think he could handle that pressure. It's just about how do their skills translate to what this offense wants. And, they were talking on Purple Daily the other day, Tyler Fornes and Thor Nystrom about, who's to say what KOC's ideal offense truly is. Was it Kirk was really good at this, so we called to those strengths and didn't want to change them halfway through the season when Dobbs came in? Or will he be willing to adjust to somebody with a little bit of a different skill set, hypothetically, if like Jaden Daniels was an option?
I've asked that question a bunch
interesting.
of times, and I might as well, butt in there and have you answer it. Can he coach a Jaden Daniels?
I think so.
Fit the offense around him.
I think so. Jaden's one of those guys where, the big thing is throwing over the middle, and it's not so much unknown on if he can or can't. It's just he wasn't asked to a ton. And so there were like those moments where like Josh Dobbs would do something and you could see KOC kind of having a mini heart attack. But he did that when Kirk ran against the Cardinals in 22. Cover the ball. What? And then got all excited, right? When he scored the touchdown. But
Yeah.
I think and again, this is where like you draft the guy you build around and you say, hey, if I'm going to have to make changes to my playbook, I'm going to do it because of the explosiveness and the ceiling of this specific player. But Jaden Daniels is the easy one to assume we'd have to make some changes for, but I think he could do that. I 100% believe he can adjust. Do I think that that's common for somebody from the McVay Shanahan line of coaching? Maybe not, but like it could be something that makes this a unique situation. I do think signing Darnold, though, points to the fact you do want that quarterback who can be a really good pocket passer with some shades of mobility, instead of just somebody who tends to be a little more mobile focused like Marcus Mariota, who went to the Commanders, I think, for a reason.
So like when we first signed Sam Darnold, I was not excited about it because I actually did a video about the worst mistake we could make is go with bring in a guy from the outside as a bridge quarterback. If we're going to be a bridge quarterback, let it be Nick Mullins because he's a team guy. He knows the offense like the back of his hand. You could tell him running the offense that he knew what he was doing. He just lacked the arm strength to make the throws that Kirk would have made. But he still threw for God knows how many yards, but he was also behind a lot and having
not enough yards. for my parlay. That's all I'll remember.
I know, not enough yards for your parlay. But my point is that he probably more than anybody would be willing to hand it over, knowing that this is the direction the team goes, because he's experienced that. But Sam Darnold, he came in as a 3rd overall pick, and he's going to Carolina to be the starter, and and then he goes to San Francisco. Did San Francisco fix him? I don't know. I brought in a San Francisco podcaster, and he told me off air, if, basically you're screwed if you're going to just play Sam Darnold all year. I don't think it's to that extent. I think a guy like Sam Darnold, if we have a solid defense that's consistent all year, unlike last year, because the last 3 or 4 games were terrible. If we have that, Sam Darnold could, score us enough points to make, to get wins. And he's won football games. It's not like he hasn't. And he's got the arm strength. And you mentioned his mobility. It is sneaky good. It is sneaky good. I forced myself to say nice things about him on Twitter. I said day 2 of saying nice things about Sam Darnold, and I said he keeps his eyes downfield. He's sneaky mobile, and he has a great arm strength. So those are the good qualities. And if you could, again, not ask him to do too much, not to make because he's not the greatest decision maker, but he can throw people open. He does read defenses, I believe. He just sometimes gets just flustered and throws it into 4 people. And I think that was my thing about Sam Darnold.
Well, I think, I was kind of on the Mullins train, but I think with Mullins, I think there's a lot of bad habits that you don't want your quarter. And not to say Sam Darnold is perfect example of a pro-ready quarterback, right? You just shared, like, he's had a lot of downs in a pretty insane career as far as changing teams already. But I think Mullins does have a little bit of that far in him, which is fun.
Oh, yeah, without the arm strength.
But also, all of those games, we were only in those games because he tried to do that. And we only really lost those games because he was throwing interceptions in the middle of a sack. Like, just asinine things where I was like, what is happening in your brain? It's entertaining football when you've already kind of mentally accepted the playoffs would be a terrible thing to have happen to the team in its current form. But I think Darnold, the biggest thing is that when he did play in San Fran last year, he had probably his most amount of stability around him, and he looked pretty confident and just able to operate that offense. I think that's all we need. We just need him not to derail the train. And another thing is like, we have a good run game now, potentially, if Aaron Jones.
Hopefully, you're on the same wavelength. That would be another question I'm going to ask you, but go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, like, that could open things up. I think, the full commitment to being open to using Ty Chandler. Obviously, he probably won't be RB1 this year, but, that two-headed monster could have a lot of success and open things up. I think if, I hate the term game manager, but if you can just have Darnold be a game manager while the rookie develops, I think that's fine. And I think with that defense we have, we could be competitive still.
If you're listening right now, if you think Kirk Cousins was captain check down, which he wasn't, honest to God, his numbers don't show it. 7.5 yards per throw. We got a guy that's 6.5 yards per attempt. And Sam Darnold in the Carolina and Jets, captain check down. So hopefully we do take he does unleash a little bit, especially since Nick Mullins is 8 yards per attempt, which is crazy numbers. A guy, but he takes a lot of chances. So hopefully there's a happy medium where we do stretch the field, because we do got guys that can do that. But you brought up the run game. Do you think and it looks like probably the starting left guard, who I like and I thought should have took over Ed Ingram last year, early on in the season, was Blake Brandel, because I thought he handled things well in the preseason. And I think he's a pretty good pass blocker. He looks like our starter right now. Even though we got that guy from the Chicago, I still think Blake Brandel has the inside track on it. Who have we done enough to give us confidence that we have a running game this year?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the thing
was Aaron Jones enough?
I think so, and I think the combo with Ty Chandler, because that change of pace, we saw the value of that when we started committing to him, but he can't pass block.
Right,
And
Aaron
I
Jones
think
can, yeah.
a little better. He's not the best, but he's also a really good receiving back. I think age is the only concern, but like, man, Green Bay smacked Dallas and he had 3 touchdowns in that game. Like that's not that was 2 months ago, 2.5 months ago. Like he did very well. I like Brandell a lot. A lot of people are still upset about Reisner, but the thing with him is that the best things he did weren't really in a traditional line of scrimmage role. It was like what he could do downfield, the drop kick play, things like that. He didn't win his matchup a lot, but then he would just keep fighting, which I love that heart. Don't get me wrong. I think Randall, in the time we've seen him, is a little more traditional. And yeah, he's not the best, but he's not gonna. I don't know. It's hard to describe the difference. I think he has a higher chance of winning consistently at the line of scrimmage. So that could be a benefit.
Yeah, I started to get on the Reisner train, and I was calling for him to come in, and I looked at his video. He literally had a huge highlight reel of blocks, and most of them were him getting downfield
Yeah.
and continuing downfield. And I brought that up. Yeah, and he was the guy. And I said he was the guy to get down there and pick the running back up at 15, 20 yards downfield, and then you'd see him all the way downfield doing freaking karate kicks, and you're like, yeah, that's the guy I expected. But you're right. He was like one of the things we tried to get a first down, and his guy blew him up on a quarterback sneak, just blew him up, and I don't think he's the guy necessarily. Maybe Brandell can do it, but maybe it's another guy. We got some middle round picks and a deep offensive line draft that I think could maybe a guy can come out of that, or at least down the road. It's funny. People would say that, hey, we haven't put any resources the offensive line. I'm like, are you kidding me? We had for every guy 6 deep was a first or second rounders on our line last year, including Reisner. So including Cleveland, who we traded, who got paid. But if we just would have hung on and he went into free agency, we might have got a 3rd round pick back for him. So it's like, what can we do?
It's one of those things. I mean, I think, hindsight's 2020 on those things. I do think Jacksonville overpaid.
Well,
quite a bit
we do
for
on YouTube.
Cleveland.
We tell people
100%. On Twitter, it's even worse.
If we're on Twitter or on YouTube, we look back and complain. That's what we do. Get used to it.
Yeah, I think at this point, I think the offensive line is something where it's my most interesting thing to watch. And I brought this up on our episode yesterday. If Michael Penix is the guy, suddenly that offensive line looks a little interesting because Darisaw is no longer your blindside guy. It's Brian O'Neill. And I love Brian O'Neill. People get really mad when you critique him at all. But since the back half of 2022 and the injury, he hasn't quite been, for logical reasons, what he was before. I'm very curious if we get that left-handed quarterback, how he does as that blindside protector compared to, what we've known Darisaw's been able to do. I think most of Kirk's issues in sacks came from Ed Ingram getting thrown back onto him or just stepping on him in general. So it'll be interesting. I think that's, as far as the offensive line, I think it'll be serviceable. I think we'll be middle of the pack. The line as a whole last year wasn't poorly ranked at all. But yeah,
in fact, overly ranked. If I'm not mistaken.
I think so. I mean, it was one of those lines where it didn't always look pretty, and I think Reisner was a huge part of this. It didn't always look pretty, but like overall, we did fine. I do think that Dobbs being in there post Kirk definitely helped like the pressures and sacks a little bit to look a little better because he was, at least for those first couple of weeks, he was moving around like a crazy man out there, which was really fun. But yeah, I think the offensive line is really something you kind of do your full evaluation of this current unit this year. We know that especially with Darisaw, you have a mainstay. Iffy on Bradbury, but you can go into free agency next year and rework that entire line sans Darisaw if you want to.
And one of the things a quarterback can really help, and Cousins obviously is, so consistent on his dropbacks, and they were quick. And so is Nick Mullins. Dobbs, not so much. I actually got in a back and forth with Kurt Warner. Somehow.
I remember this.
Somehow, I got in a back and forth with Kurt Warner where I said that Dobbs is inconsistent, slow dropbacks. So he might go 7 or 10 yards deep. You just never know. And then he did not lead receivers. He was late with his throws, and everything was a cannon. And Kurt Warner was just praising him, talking about how this is what the Vikings need, kind of shit. And I chimed in, and he replied back. And then everybody's like, I think I'll listen to the Hall of Famer. And I feel like I got vindicated because, I was yet to see, because everybody he was throwing to the first couple of games was wide ass open, right? And then he ran with his legs if he just felt like it wasn't there. But then obviously defenses figured out that he's dropping 10 yards and these guys are blocking 7 and they're getting to him. And he's putting his head down. So I think with the offensive line, that next rookie, if it's an experienced dude, and I do feel like and I know Voldemort, Bonex, or Penix with that experience, I think if I'm not mistaken, like Jaden Daniels took snaps under center, and then of course JJ McCarthy, those guys. I think all of them could be taught. I think all of them. Jaden Daniels, I know you were down on him when he was at ASU because he wasn't good, but when he got to LSU, I believe this was Thor that told me this because I brought him on my show and we talked about every single quarterback. That great guest, by the way. If you haven't had him on yet, I'm sure he's been on the channel. But if you ever get him on a guest, it's awesome. He talked about how they put him in like a virtual reality situation, and they ended up having to speed it up because he got so good at it.
Yeah.
Of reading and reacting to, pressures and stuff like that. So he is coachable. And I think JJ McCarthy, the reason why I like JJ McCarthy over May myself is I like the guy and I like his personality. I think it will fit with the Vikings. I think he'll win fans over. And I think a guy like that will get a longer leash with fans. And again, his age, but how important do you think is the personality coming to this Minnesota team?
Huge. I think May, because he's kind of got that like Southern young guy vibe to him where he just kind of seems a little more chill. I think that would still work. I think Daniels, obviously you have to account for the LSU factor and the fact that him and JJ were hanging out with each other at the Super Bowl, stuff like that. They have a similar inner circle of connections at the university. But I think McCarthy, the term I keep seeing on Twitter is aura. Like he just has a vibe to him that I like. I think
like the Joe Burrow vibe.
Yeah, I would be. That's actually who I think his game is very similar to, but some people disagree. But I like him. I think he's right now the guy I think is probably going to be our quarterback. There's a reason that the sports books have him at like minus 150 to go to the Vikings. But then again, those could be completely wrong as they were with Will Levis. So I think it's going to be, I think that KOC identifying his guy, a large part of that is based on the culture fit. And he has a read of this team. He has a read of his main players at this point being there going into year 3. He knows guys that will mesh with that locker room. And that's the biggest thing for him is that synergy within the team. I don't think he's going to bring somebody in who is, I mentioned it. I don't think historically somebody like Spencer Rattler would be a good fit. Yes, I've heard all these great things about how he's gotten his act together.
Video on him.
Yeah, I don't want, I live 20 minutes from where he went to high school. I know people who know him. Like, I'd rather not invest, our quarterback in the future is a 3rd, 4th round pick who might not really vibe well with the team. So I think any of those 3 main guys, May, McCarthy, Daniels could fit in. I just think it's up to KOC and Kwesi just to really nail those interviews, because it looked like Jaron Hall was their fit based off interviews last year, and he just, obviously being a 5th round pick, he just didn't turn out to be the player they wanted.
We're gonna end this on the defense, but before we go to that, I would like we talked about smoke screens earlier. Someone tweeted out like, "See, they're not excited about JJ McCarthy because they only set their quarterback, their 2 quarterback coaches to his pro day."
Already had a private workout, was reported yesterday,
Right.
I believe.
Yeah, right. So, and we didn't even talk to Harrison Smith, so. And if you ever get a chance, watch my video I did with Wabi. If you want to know the what it was like during the Randy Moss trade to come back to the Vikings, or when Harrison Smith got drafted, how the media team got screwed up, and just the inside things about, hey, what were we thinking when we did this, and that is it's just freaking pure gold. But now is so, smoke screens, or we may already like the guy. I don't need to see him. Let's have McCown go down and talk to him, see what he, because get that relationship type of thing. We've already interviewed the dude. We've already brought him in as a personal workout. Why why waste more resources? We could already think, yeah, he's definitely one of the guys we're interested in. I could easily see that. Why send down the GM? Why send down the head coach? Let's just get the 2. They're already sold. Let's get the 2 guys to just watch him. And honestly, he balled out. I think I saw some of his throws, and they were pretty freaking good.
Everybody's calling him Zach Wilson, which I'm already, just because somebody looks good at a pro day doesn't make them Zach Wilson, and they have good hair doesn't make them Zach Wilson.
One of the impressive things I think he did, was that he had guys running at him and to throw around him, and he did stress his throws, and he did create throws where he had to throw back across his body, roll left and throw it to the right, and he did stressful throws, and obviously Caleb Williams knocked out of the park too. But yeah, so he's not hurt himself in the draft. Nobody's really hurt themselves at quarterback so far in the combine. I don't think anybody's dropped. And you mentioned Spencer Rattler. I actually think he's turned his draft stock around to where you just said he might be a 3rd or 4th rounder now, when he might have been deep, 5, 6, 7th rounder.
Yeah, I just think the teams that really want to go the route of a rookie quarterback, I think Rattler still probably leans more towards the 5th, unless a team just is like, oh, we found the steal of the draft. Because I think the QB needy teams are going to address it. I could see, because again, you have those first 3 picks likely to be quarterbacks. Then you have Penix and Nix, who are borderline 1st, 2nd round picks. You have a lot of teams that, like Atlanta, that solved the QB issue with a free agent, in their case, Kirk. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be interesting to see at that point, when you get into the 3rd, is there going to be a team that reaches for somebody like Spencer Rattler because they're so desperate to find a young guy, or will a lot of teams, there's going to be 6 rookie quarterbacks taken within the first 2 rounds, and most likely. And so it's going to be interesting to see what team decides that he's worth an investment and where that decision comes from.
Yeah, it does feel like most of the top guys are going to go in the first 2 rounds. Now, as far as defense goes, we talked about this off air. If we don't trade up and we don't get that guy, what does Jason Harmon, GM of the Vikings, do?
Easy. You go with Byron Murphy at 11 if he's there. You don't need to go Jared Verse. You took care of the hole at edge, at least in the interim. Mm-hmm. And then you draft Michael Penix at 23. Stay away from Voldemort from Oregon. You go with Michael Penix, who I've said for months on end, I think has the best pure arm in the draft. It's, does he fit the offense? Can he make the specific throws you want? I don't know if he's necessarily the best fit for the Vikings in those cases. And again, you also lose the advantage of Darisaw being your blindside guy by definition. So that's what I would do. I would get a big boy in the middle of the defense, plug up those lanes, make sure that we're set there. And then I would take Obviously, if for some reason KOC really believes Nix is way better than Penix, that would surprise me, but that's his prerogative. They interviewed Penix both at the Senior Bowl and the Combine. I don't even know for sure if they interviewed Bo Nix at the Senior Bowl. I think they did, but not at the Combine from what was reported. Again, could all be BS. Who knows? But that just makes sense to me as your fallback option.
Yeah, I'm not positive who they didn't interview. I'm not at the combine, but I think you're right about the Senior Bowl. And hey, as you get into this, it's pretty easy to get credentials at the Senior Bowl. I was gonna go there, and then I wrecked my car, so I was like, can't go.
Might have to do that next year. Hopefully, I'm not going next year to scout the Vikings' next quarterback because I'm hoping that gets taken care of now.
Yeah, well, we'll just draft the the Senior Bowl MVP.
Yeah,
again, like we did Ponder.
Oh.
But defensive wise, in this draft, yet to happen in free agency, fill our holes on defense. What do you think we need to still do to solidify this defense?
Defensive tackles number one. I think Shaq Griffith definitely helps at corner. I
liked him.
He's a little past his prime. I would still try for somebody like Xavier Howard or Lattimore, just a veteran, a little older who can help these guys like Mekhi Blackman and Caleb Evans maybe tap into whatever may need to be developed. And then I think if you do that, then any non-quarterback draft picks you have in a trade up scenario could go towards just find a big dude and see what he can do at defensive tackle and draft a bunch of interior offensive linemen, and everything else should be pretty dang set. And draft a kicker. Very important we do
that. Jason, we're on the same freaking page. I'm like D-line, offensive line. There might be a receiver to come in and compete. Running back, we kind of took care of that. Maybe we'll find that out.
I think for now, I think that's not a need.
For 24. It's not my top list of needs. It's definitely a defensive line, and then offensive guard or center, because really we don't even have a backup center now, I don't think. But yeah, hey Jason, it was a pleasure having you on again, man.
Pleasure as always, man.
Don't be a stranger, and don't get too big for me that you won't come back on my show, man.
Hey, if that ever happens, I'll have you on, but I don't see that. Hey, you're doing awesome work over here. I don't see that happening anytime soon. We're the baby podcast. We're just getting started. We got mom and dad watching us on VikesNow, which is an awesome place to start off. But I'm excited. We'll definitely we talk on Twitter almost every day in each other's replies. So we'll stay in touch, and hopefully I'll be back on soon.
All right, Skull Vikes.
Skull Vikes.